Good evening, everyone. This is Jessica, and I will be joined momentarily by our senior analyst, Kenneth. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at CrunchTime VIP. Welcome to the CrunchTime Sports Advantage Network's Top 25 rankings, where we take a different approach to evaluating the best teams in college football. Unlike traditional polls, our rankings are fluid and adapt each week based on the most current data. We assess every key aspect of a team's performance, going beyond just wins and losses. We start by looking at power rankings and strength of schedule, not just for the games already played, but also for the tough matchups looming ahead. Then, we break down each team across all three phases of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. For special teams, we dig deep into the kicking game, analyzing field goals, punting, and even the impact of kickoff and punt returns. These often overlooked plays can change the course of a game, and we make sure they get the attention they deserve. On offense and defense, it's not just about how many points are scored or allowed, we focus on how effective, efficient, and explosive a team is. We evaluate their ability to move the ball, make critical stops, and create big plays. Whether it's marching down the field with precision or generating game-changing defensive stands, we look at the numbers that truly matter. This isn't just another top 25 list. It's a comprehensive, data-driven analysis that reflects the complexities and nuances of college football. So, buckle up as we dive into this week's rankings and break down the teams that are making waves.
And Jessica, fantastic lead in as always. You and Summer, whoever's in the chair, does a fantastic job of really just setting the stage for me. So thank you as always. Ladies and gentlemen, as Jessica mentioned, when we break down all three phases of the game, looking at your team's offense, how explosive, how efficient, how effective they are. Same can be said about the defense, how explosive. You don't allow big plays to be given up. You keep teams out of the end zone, either force them to either kick a field goal or either force a turnover or a punt. All of those things go into the evaluation of a team. And as she talked about it, the special teams can never be overlooked, as we saw that last week with BYU with that electric punt return that really turned the momentum of that ball game that they were in. So all three phases are looked at. We're looking at your strength of schedule, how it adjusts each week based on not only what you do on what your team does on the field, but how their opponents perform each and every week. That affects your strength of schedule. And of course, we talked about it, um, just a complete evaluation of your power rankings. We have a vast number of power rankings that we use that adjust based on opponents. So a lot of a lot of details in that. So we're not going to get you bogged down with that. We are going to get you into this top 25, and we're going to work our way from 25 all the way down to number one. And then we're going to look at the upcoming schedule for our top 25, whether they're on a bye week this week or if they are getting ready for a pivotal matchup this week. So let's jump into it with number 25. And coming in at number 25 is the Clemson Tigers. We know that this team is off to a decent start. Had that big loss in week one against the University of Georgia. Nothing to hang their hat on as far as that goes. But Clemson sits right now with that 2-1 record, getting ready to really get deep within conference play. They're in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So Clemson comes in, Clemson checks in at number 25. Coming in at number 24 off a devastating loss there last week to the University of Tennessee. We'll hear more about them later on in the podcast. The Oklahoma Sooners. We know that they're making a quarterback change there in Norman, as Jackson Arnold really struggled there behind that offensive line for Tennessee. Saw a little bit of excitement as freshman Michael Haynes Michael Hawkins Jr. They're out of the Metroplex, 6'1", 200-pound freshman, really kind of sparked this offense late in the ball game. Kind of had to make some plays behind. We talked about it. That offensive line there for the Sooners was going to struggle in a big time matchup, and they certainly did. But Oklahoma 3-1 on the season, holding steady at number 24 in our rankings. Coming in at number 23. And got to be honest with you folks, this one surprised me just a little bit, but there was enough meat on the bone there for the Auburn Tigers coming in at 2-2 to still hold on to a top 25 spot in this week's rankings. We know Auburn is coming off of a very difficult game there against Arkansas on the Plains, as it was turnover city in that ball game. Auburn, 5 turnovers in that ball game. 4 of those coming by interception in that contest. Auburn really struggles right now to get any kind of consistency out of the passing game. Needs to lean more on that rushing attack, especially early on in the ball game, while you can really kind of wear down the opposing team's defense and not play so one-dimensional. The question for the Auburn Tigers this week is, who's going to be QB1 going into their next matchup? Is it going to be Peyton Thorne or Hank Brown? We saw Brown turn the ball over 3 times last week against Arkansas. Peyton Thorne had a so-so game coming in relief, but we know that he was just benched a couple of weeks ago. So we know that Hugh Freeze doesn't have a lot of confidence in either one of these quarterbacks so far. So Auburn, 2-2, as I mentioned. Both of those losses coming at home. Matter of fact, Auburn's first 5 games will be at home. So going 2-2 is not what the War Eagle faithful had in store for their Tigers early on in the season. We'll see if Hugh Freeze can get that turned around there in Auburn. Coming in at number 22 this week, and that is the UNLV Running Rebels. Now, usually when we talk about UNLV, we are talking about a very good basketball team back in the late 80s, early 90s. The Running Rebels were one of the best college basketball teams on the hardwood. Right now, we're talking about that UNLV football team, 3-0 on the early season with wins over Houston. That game came on the road, and then getting a win at home against FCS team Utah Tech, and then 2 weeks ago, a big-time win against Kansas. That game coming on the road, that Friday night game there in Kansas, was the kind of launching point for UNLV finding their way into the top 25 this week. 2 wins over Power 4 conference opponents. That will get you recognized as a group of 5 team without a doubt. So really good job there by head coach Barry Odom, doing a fantastic job there with the Running Rebels. And we're going to find out, they have a big matchup coming up this weekend, and we'll mention that here in just a moment. Coming in at number 21 out of the Big Ten, and that is the Oregon Ducks. Head coach Dan Lanning has gotten his team off to a 3-0 start. That 3-0 did not look really clean in the first 2 weeks. Kind of struggled there with FCS opponent Idaho, winning that contest there in Autzen Stadium 24-14. Had to go up against a really good team in Boise State there at home, getting that win a few weeks ago, 37-34. And then in the Civil War 2 weeks ago, absolutely went into Corvallis and laid the sledgehammer to their in-state foe, the Oregon State Beavers, winning that contest 49-14. And folks, it wasn't even that close. Oregon coming off a bye week last week. So hopefully Dan Lanning has gotten a chance to get that offensive line completely jailed up as we saw 2 weeks ago against Oregon State. And then really kind of let Dylan Gabriel kind of take the lead there for this Oregon offense. If they can play that physical brand of defense that we saw 2 weeks ago against Oregon State, the Ducks will be right where we thought they would be at the end of the year. Coming in at number 20 out of the Big 12, we're going to call this one of America's teams, and that is Brigham Young University. 4-0 on the season. And folks, this team has absolutely looked fantastic early on as we get to the quarter pole of the college football season. Taking a look at what they've done on the field so far in that 4-0 record, started off the year with a very convincing win over FCS opponent in Southern Illinois, winning that contest 41-13. In week one, going to the Metroplex and getting a very hard-fought win over SMU, 18-15. Went up to Laramie, which is a very difficult place to play because of the altitude. Got a big-time win 2 weeks ago against Wyoming, winning that contest 34-14. And then just last week, laid the absolute smackdown on Kansas State as they went into LaVell Edwards Stadium and absolutely came out there with their tail tucked between their legs in Kansas State. Getting that big-time win there in conference was a very good start for BYU. And this was a team that did not have a lot of expectations coming into the season, as BYU was expected to be one of the bottom teams in the Big 12. Right now, this team has put themselves in position to absolutely compete for a Big 12 title bid there. So we know if they're able to secure that bid, that means that the BYU Cougars will be going to the college football playoffs. Long season ahead, but so far, so good for the Brigham Young University Cougars. Coming in at number 19, another conference team there out of the Big 12, and that is the University of Central Florida Golden Knights. And this team is 3-0 on the season. Taking a look at their early season schedule, dominant win in week one over FCS opponent in New Hampshire, winning that contest 57-3. We had some question marks coming out of that game. Handled business in week one. In week two against Sam Houston. As this team kind of builds their way up as they moved up from the FCS level into Division I last year. UCF was once again able to take care of business in that contest, winning that game 45-14. And then 2 weeks ago, absolutely a come from behind win there against new conference rival TCU. Trailed that game going into the fourth quarter by double digits. Got the job done, winning that game 35-34. Had the week off last week to kind of get ready for this next stretch run there for UCF, led by head coach Gus Malzahn, doing a fantastic job this year with the transfer quarterback in KJ Jefferson, and one of the best rushing attacks in all of college football. We talk about that 1-2 combination for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Folks, we cannot lose sight of this four-headed monster there in Orlando, led by Mr. Harvey, RJ Harvey, Penny Boone, who transferred in. You're talking about Miles Montgomery, and of course, the big fellow, at the quarterback spot in KJ Jefferson. That guy is a load to bring down, and Gus Malzahn knows how to use those big body quarterbacks to get a rushing advantage there in college football. So Gus doing a fantastic job there, just hanging behind the scenes, but getting his team in position for a Big 12 title run. Coming in at number 18 with a 3-1 record is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And the Irish have definitely worked their way back into the top 25 for us. Coming off of that win in week 1 there in College Station over the Texas A&M Aggies, 23-13. You thought that Notre Dame was really going to set themselves up for a very strong run there in the season, but have absolutely stubbed their toe against some teams from the MAC conference. We saw them lose at home against Northern Illinois, 16-14. Came back 2 weeks ago and absolutely laid waste to in-state rival there in Purdue, 66-7, but really struggled against Miami of Ohio last week, winning that contest 28-3. We know the Irish have another big-time matchup coming up this week, and Marcus Freeman really needs to start stacking some wins here and not stubbing his toe against quote-unquote some inferior opponents here in the 2024 season for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So Notre Dame checks in at number 18. Coming in at number 17, still out of the Big 12 here, and we're going to talk about the depth of this conference here towards the end of this podcast. But Kansas State coming in with a 3-1 record. We talked about that loss last week against BYU, but early on in the season did get wins over FCS opponent UT Martin, winning that contest 41-6. Getting a gritty win against Tulane 34-27. Did take a defensive score there to kind of seal that game there late in the ball game. Absolutely dominated Arizona a couple of weeks ago on that Friday night. Absolutely just dominant performance, 31-7 against Arizona. And then, of course, last week just were either unprepared or just wasn't expecting the kind of physicality there against BYU in that contest, and they found out really quickly that BYU is a team to absolutely contend with. So Kansas State head coach Chris Klieman, get your team refocused because conference play is here, and now the modified round robin really begins in the Big 12. We know that we do have the conference game, but you want to make sure that you're one of those two teams playing there for the conference championship. Coming in at number 16, and you want to talk about a team that is absolutely on a slide here, and that is the Virginia Tech Hokies. This team, probably one of our biggest disappointments, 2-2 on the season. We know that in week 0 had that loss against Vanderbilt here in my backyard in Nashville, losing that game 34-27 in overtime. Followed that up with a win over Marshall, 31-14. You thought that they were starting to get right. Went across state to Norfolk, Virginia to take on Old Dominion. Won that game quite convincingly, 37-17. But last week, there in Lane Stadium, absolutely was physically dominated by the Rutgers Scarlet Knight, as Rutgers got out to a 16-7 lead early in that contest, went up 23-7 by the end of the third quarter. We saw some late garbage scores there by Virginia Tech to make that score look a little bit more respectable, but just could not close the deal there in Blacksburg. So Virginia Tech holding on for dear life in our top 25. Need to see this team with their big time matchup this weekend. And folks, that point spread has just not stopped going in favor of their opponent this week. And that game is a Friday night showcase showdown coming up later on this week. Coming in at number 15, another team out of the Big 12, and that is the Iowa State Cyclones. This team comes into this week with a perfect 3-0 record. We know that in week 0 got a nice win over FCS team there in North Dakota, set up them to get a big time win over in-state opponent, the Iowa Hawkeyes. They're winning that contest 20-19. Had the bye week, and then just last week, absolutely laid waste to Arkansas State, 52-7. So Iowa State, as you get ready to get into conference play, we're going to start to find out more about your team. But we know when you're able to beat your in-state opponent, the Iowa Hawkeyes, we know that you can play a physical brand of football. Going to highlight their quarterback, Rocco Beck. Early on in the season, 54 for 79. That's 68% completion percentage for 743 yards, 9.4 yards per attempt, 6 passing touchdowns to just 2 INTs. If Rocco Beck can continue to give them solid quarterback play, we hope to start to see the run game kind of take some of the weight off this young quarterback. Iowa State could be one of those teams to keep an eye on in the Big 12. And you want to talk about a team that absolutely got trucked this past weekend. That team is our number 14 team, the North Carolina Tar Heels. Just absolutely destroyed last week, 70-50. And no, folks, that's not the UNC basketball team. That is the UNC football team. Folks, James Madison scored 25 points in the first quarter, followed that up with 28 points in the second quarter. Mack Brown called this the most embarrassing loss of his 35 years as a major college football head coach. And for a brief moment, there was serious consideration that Mack would step down Sunday morning after this loss. He is going to, as it stands right now, coach out the end of the season. We'll see where Mack future goes, but that was just an embarrassing loss there for the Tar Heels, and will need to get things back on track if they have any hopes of remaining in our top 25. Coming in at number 13, and I know this is going to surprise some people out of the Southeastern Conference, but looking at their resume, really cannot have them any higher. It's not about how well they've played, it's the fact that they haven't played anyone yet, and that is the Ole Miss Rebels. And a quick hello to all of our Ole Miss friends that are listening to the podcast. Miss Donna, Ashley, all of you ladies, you know how much we appreciate all of the support here. But right now, looking at who Ole Miss has played, you tell me where the best win so far on the season comes from. FCS Furman, you beat them 76-0. You beat Middle Tennessee State at home 52-3. You went on the road and beat a very below average Wake Forest team 40-6. And then just last week, you laid waste to Georgia Southern 52-13. This isn't a question about how talented Ole Miss is. We just need to see you step up in weight class and punch against some teams that can actually punch you back. We'll start to see some of that now that Ole Miss is out of non-conference play, and from here on out, Ole Miss, um, you're going to be charged with playing some some better competition here over the next 8 to 9 weeks of the regular season. So, Ole Miss, just continue to take care of business. The rankings will take care of themselves. Right now, you're sitting at 13. A win this week will slide you up a few spots, but you just got to keep taking care of business. And once that schedule stiffens up a little bit, um, will not be surprised to see you where you feel like Ole Miss should be. Coming in at number 12. And folks, this is kind of one of the surprises we talked about. Um, the Arkansas Razorbacks check in at number 12. The Razorbacks on the season sit with a 3-1 record. Coming off that win last weekend, they're on the plains against the Auburn Tigers 24-14. Loss The only loss came in double overtime where Arkansas absolutely let that game slip through their fingers against Oklahoma State, losing in double overtime 39-31. But they are calling the Hogs there for head coach Sam Pullport Pittman. And I think that him, along with offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino, may have found something in quarterback Talon Green, 6'6", 230-pound junior out of Louisville, Texas. And looking at his numbers early on in the season, as a as the quarterback, he's 65 for 121, only completing about 54%. 957 yards through the air, 7.9 yards per attempt. Absolutely need to improve on those numbers. 4 touchdowns, 4 INTs. Got to clean that up. But where he is absolutely making a difference is on the ground. 59 rush attempts early on in the season, 325 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, long run of 36 yards, does have 4 rushing touchdowns. So, Arkansas, you are in a very unique position right now, and nobody, and that includes us, had you projected to be 3-1 early on in the season. Arkansas, keep taking care of business. We may be talking about you in a whole different light here later on in the season. Checking in at number 11. And folks, I'll be quite honest with you. I thought that the Miami Hurricanes would be ranked just a little bit higher as they are 4-0 on the season. But as we dove into the numbers, deep into the metrics, we're just waiting for Miami to continue to step up in weight class. Getting that big time win as far as in-state rivalry goes against the Florida Gators, going to Gainesville and winning that contest 41-17. Followed that up with a 56-9 win over in-state Florida A&M. The Rattlers just were outclassed in that ball game. 62 points shutout against Ball State here just a couple of weeks ago, and then last week in a game where the weather got a little bit dicey, beating South Florida 50-15. So why aren't the Hurricanes in the top 10? Folks, what is really dragging them down right now is just that strength of schedule. We're going to see that get a little bit of boost here over the next few weeks. So Miami Hurricanes, want to give a shout out to one of our friends on Twitter, Tommy, big Miami Hurricane fan. Tommy, we respect what your Canes are doing right now. The numbers have just got to play catch up. So there's a little bit of a lag there, but trust me, if the Hurricanes continue to win, especially with that game coming up this weekend, and looking at their next 4 opponents, Miami has a chance to really see themselves go from outside of the top 10 to deep within inside of the top 10. So, Miami Hurricanes fans, just be patient. The numbers will catch up with where you think your Hurricanes should be. Coming in at number 10, as we get to the top 10, and we're going to the Big Ten here, and that's where we find the Iowa Hawkeyes. The Hawkeyes come in with a 3-1 record. We talked about that loss coming just a few weeks ago against Iowa State. Hard fought matchup, but it wasn't a horrible loss for the Iowa Hawkeyes there. So Iowa 3-1, taking a look at a couple of their wins just over the past couple of weeks, did look very strong against Troy a couple of weeks ago, winning 38-21. And then last week, a dominant performance as they kicked off Big Ten play against the Minnesota Golden Gophers, going into Minneapolis and absolutely laying siege there to the Golden Gophers, winning that contest 31-14. And folks, it was a dominant performance from the word go. Overcame a 7-point deficit at the half, but outscored Minnesota 24-rip in the second half. So fantastic job there by head coach Kirk Ferentz and that running game. And I continue to talk about this young man, Caleb Johnson. Last week against Minnesota, folks, listen to these numbers. 21 carries, 206 yards. The young man basically averaged a first down every time he touched the ball, 9.8 yards per rushing attempt. 3 big-time rushing touchdowns in that ball game. Took all the pressure off of Cade McNamara as he could just really just kind of hand the ball off and watch the show. Want to give another shout out to his understudy at the running back, young Mr. Patterson there out of Pompano Beach, Florida. That 5'10", 195-pound sophomore also had a really solid game against Minnesota. 18 carries, 66 yards in that contest. So Iowa may start to have a little bit of a 1-2 punch, a little thunder and lightning there with Johnson and Patterson. So keep an eye on the Iowa Hawkeyes because this team is fundamentally sound from the coaching standpoint, and with one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football in Phil Parker, you know that defense is always going to be sound. Checking in at number 8 out of the Big 12, it's the Utah Utes. And Utah has played their last 2 games without their star quarterback, Cam Rising. Turn to Isaac Wilson. That's right, younger brother of Zach Wilson. Very high pick with the New York Jets just a few years ago. Now the backup there in the Mile High City with the Denver Broncos. Last weekend, a very Utah type game, winning that game 22-19 against the Oklahoma State Cowboys to kick off Big 12 conference play. And folks, as we did the podcast last week, I said, regardless of who was playing at quarterback, I liked Utah in this ball game because of the running back, Micah Bernard. In that contest against Oklahoma State, outdueled the former Doak Walker Award winner in Ollie Gordon II. Bernard went for 25 carries, 182 yards, 7.3 yards per carry, had that long run of 62 yards in that contest. So fantastic job there. And we know that head coach Kyle Whittingham, that team is absolutely going to play lights out defense. Folks, absolutely snuffed out the rushing attack for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Outgained Oklahoma State on the ground by 201 yards. 249 for Utah, only 48 for Oklahoma State. Made it difficult on the Oklahoma State passing game as Oklahoma State 19 for 44, only 237 yards. So a lot of attempts, not a lot of yards, only 5.4 yards per attempt did force 2 INTs in that contest. So Utah is introducing the Big 12 to what fans and the former artists known as the Pac 12 learn. Utah will punch you in the mouth, and if you dare to punch back, they will keep punching until you fall out. Coming in at number 8, and right now, this is America's team, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights out of the Big Ten. And Rutgers comes into this contest with a 3-0 record, and we talked about it. Had some questions there about their first 2 opponents, beating Howard there at home 44-7, then beating Akron out of the MAC 49-17. But they absolutely went into Lane Stadium last weekend and took care of business, beating Virginia Tech 26-23. The State University of New Jersey, aka the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, under head coach Greg Schiano, doing a fantastic job, and they have a nice showdown coming up with, can't believe we're saying this, in-state rival, the Washington Huskies, on the Friday night special coming up this weekend. We'll touch on that once we get to our top 25 here. Coming in at number 7 out of the Big Ten, and folks, Curt Cignetti leads America's other superhero team, the 4-0 Indiana Hoosiers. We told you this was going to be an offense that could absolutely light up the skies with scoring points there with young Mr. Rourke transferring from the MAC, was the former MAC player of the year last year. And he has picked up on this offense quite well, as this team has not scored less than 30 points in any of their 4 contests. Now, we know they're about to start stepping up in competition here in the next few weeks, but this is still Indiana football we're talking about, and just doing a fantastic job there. And let's just take a look at young Curtis Rourke there, the 5'9", 6'5", 220-pound senior there for Indiana. Where's number 9? I don't know what I was looking at. Sorry about that slip there. But on the season, he is 71 for 94, completing almost 76% of his passes for 1,013 yards, 10.8 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns, no INTs. That's how you win ball games, folks. Quarterback taking care of the ball. Coming in at number 6, fresh off a big-time win there in Norman, Oklahoma, and that is where we find the Tennessee Volunteers. And quick shout out to our good friend Julie Vols, co-host with our good friend Matlock, as they host a very good morning show on 850 The Ticket down in the beautiful Emerald Coast. Matt Locked and Loaded. I have the pleasure of joining them on Wednesdays and Fridays. Wednesday, we take a look back at the previous week, and Friday, we set the table for the upcoming games this week. So, Matlock, Julie Vols, always want to give you guys a quick hello each and every podcast we get a chance to do. So, let's talk about the Volunteers and what they did last week. There was just a little bit of questions about this contest. We did not have those questions. Tennessee, going into that game against Oklahoma, the talking points were, well, they haven't played anybody yet. How will this Tennessee offense do against a really good defensive scheme there by Brent Venables and a very physical defensive line there for Oklahoma? Well, what we found out is this team under Josh Heupel is just a little bit different this year. Tennessee is physical on the offense and defensive side of the ball. Folks, I thought that Tennessee would win this game by double digits. They absolutely did that. Here's the number that I want you to remember about Tennessee coming out of that game. It wasn't the amount of rushing yards that they had in that ball game, 151 to be exact. It wasn't the yards per rush attempt, right at 3 yards per rush attempt. It was 52 rushing attempts. Tennessee knew that they had to out physical a team that was going to be very physical with them. And Tennessee absolutely checked every mark on defense from that aspect. Made it difficult on Jackson Arnold to get any semblance of a passing game going. It's the Tennessee defense that we're going to come out of this game talking about. Uh, 34 rushing attempts by Oklahoma, 36 yards. Oh boy. Now, we still have some question marks about the Tennessee Volunteers secondary as they weren't tested this past weekend against Oklahoma because the offensive line for Oklahoma just did not stand up and give a very good showing in that contest. Nico had a okay game for the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, you're going to look at his numbers and say he was 13 for 21, 194 yards, 9.2 yards per pass attempt. You told me that you like that number, and I do. 1 touchdown, no INTs. Took care of the ball in that aspect. Here's where we got to separate some of the numbers. Out of that 194 yards, folks, 108 of them came on 2 pass attempts. That 66-yard catch and run by Dante Thornton for the touchdown, and then Brew McCoy had a 42-yard pass completion. Folks, if you subtract that out, Nico was 11 for 19 for less than 90 yards in that contest. If you want to slow down Tennessee, don't give up the big chunk plays and be ready to tackle running back Dylan Sampson, who had just a very workmanlike performance. 24 carries, 92 yards, 1 rushing touchdown. Tennessee, we like what we saw. We just need more information from you. And the SEC stranglehold on the top 7 will continue here as we get to number 5, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs. And the last time we saw Georgia was a very lackluster performance there by the offense in Lexington, Kentucky 2 weeks ago. The Dogs come in 3-0, fresh off of their first bye week. As we look back at that game against Kentucky, the defense was missing most of their players on the front 7. It was the offense that just really struggled, and we'll talk about it on the breakdown this weekend. There are some significant injuries for the Georgia Bulldogs on the offensive side of the ball that we're going to have to get some answers for. We know one player is already out, and we know one is dealing with a shoulder injury. We'll see if the one that's dealing with the shoulder injury has had a chance to heal up, and we know he's going to play, but is he going to be full go in that contest? So be sure to check out the breakdown in that contest. Let's just take a look at some statistical performances here for the Georgia Bulldogs. And a number that is just really kind of throwing me off here just a little bit is Georgia's not really Georgia right now early on in the season. Georgia isn't running the ball with the kind of consistency that we're used to seeing. 2 weeks ago against Kentucky, 30 rushing attempts, only 102 yards, 3.4 yards per carry. Bulldogs are going to have to get that addressed, and they're going to have to get that addressed very quickly as they have a very significant game coming up on this Saturday as they will make their way uh, to Alabama to take on the Crimson Tide. The SEC run continues with the number 4 spot, and this is a little bit of a surprise, folks. Got to be honest with you. I did not expect the Missouri Tigers to be rated this high, 4-0 on the season, coming off a double overtime win against the Vanderbilt Commodores, who have been playing some really good football there, winning that game 30-27. We heard head coach Eli Drinkowitz absolutely say that he and the rest of the coaching staff uh, will appreciate the 4-0 start to the season, but will need to continue to get better. They have a week to kind of get ready as they will get deeper into conference play once they come off of their bye week. And just looking at their quarterback, Brady Cook, 6'2", senior out of St. Louis. Early on in the season, Cook 92 for 134, completing 69% of his passes for 946 yards, 7 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, 1 INT. We'll see if what Coach Drinkowitz talked about, getting this offense definitely off to a better start in some of these games and not having to play from behind, if that's something that they work on going in to deeper into conference play. And out of the Big Ten, coming in at number 3 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. And quick hello to our good friend Amber Holly and all of our great Buckeye friends. Ohio State 3-0 on the season, and Ohio State has taken care of business in the first 3 weeks, and that's really all we're going to point to at this point. 52-6 win over Akron, a shutout win over Western Michigan, 56-0, and then just last week beating Marshall 49-14. There's really not a whole lot that we've learned in the first 3 games about Ohio State that we didn't know going into the season. The running back duo of Quinshon Junkins and Travion Henderson has been as advertised in the non-conference. Freshman phenom Jeremiah Smith has shown the flashes that we saw in the preseason camp. Like I said, not a surprise. We know that Jim Knowles is going to have a lights out defense. No surprise there whatsoever. We know when we'll start to kind of get some of the grades as far as the 2024 Ohio State Buckeye team. We'll start to get those here in the month of October. If you look at that schedule, you can definitely see why over the next probably 6 weeks we'll start to kind of get some of those more important data points for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Coming in at number 2, the Texas Longhorns. We know that Quinn Ewers is dealing with a slight injury. It's nothing significant. We've seen young Arch Manning play well in mop-up duty and then getting the start last week over a completely overmatched Louisiana Monroe team winning that contest 51-3. We know that the big win came a few weeks ago, going to Ann Arbor and taking care of business, unlike USC against Michigan, winning that contest 31-12. So the Texas Longhorns have done exactly what they needed to do early on in the season, and that is just handle business and get ready to start conference play this weekend as a big time favorite against Mississippi State. And you want to talk about a team that's a dumpster fire, folks? That is the Mississippi State Bulldogs under first year head coach Jeff Lebby. But um, not going to really point out any numbers for Texas because outside of the Michigan game, we really haven't seen this team truly battle tested yet. That's coming here in a few weeks, but Texas has checked all the boxes here in the first quarter of the season. And folks, we are now at the number one team uh, in this week's poll, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. The Tide coming off a bye week and looked the part against Western Kentucky, winning that game 63-0. That score against South Alabama, a little bit deceiving, as we know that game was extremely tight until about the last 8 minutes of the contest. And then you saw Alabama absolutely pull away, scoring 28 points in that fourth and final quarter there to beat South Florida 42-16. And then a big time win over a Big Ten opponent there in Wisconsin. Alabama absolutely went up to Madison and absolutely turned the lights off in that ball game extremely early a couple of weeks ago, winning that contest 42-10. Jalen Milroe accounted for 5 touchdowns in that contest against the Wisconsin Badgers. And what we're going to look at with the Crimson Tide is first year head coach Kalen DeBoer has checked all the boxes. Want to see that passing game really start to kind of take shape as they will be kicking off conference play here this weekend against a top 5 opponent in our rankings in the Georgia Bulldogs. So Alabama comes in this first edition of the poll as the number one team. And just to take a look at how the point system kind of graded out, and I would say the really the closest margin, if we're looking at just the top 10, it looks like it would be between number 5 Georgia and number 6 Tennessee. The point differential for us in this grading system that we use, it is really less than 25 points. Matter of fact, it's 25 points exactly. So Tennessee strength of schedule is really what's dragging them down. As we look at our strength of schedule rankings, Tennessee right now projects to have the 101st rated schedule. Folks, that is a bottom 40 strength of schedule. So that's what's dragging Tennessee down right now. As their opponents start to pick up some wins, you'll see that strength of schedule will adjust over the next few weeks, not just their strength of schedule, but their opponent's strength of schedule as well. So that was one of the biggest things that we saw stand out for us doing this first poll. So let's take a look at the top 25 in action this weekend as far as our poll. We have 3 featured matchups we have 3 featured matchups where top 25 teams will be squaring off against each other. Uh, the Showcase Showdown, without a doubt, is number 5 Georgia traveling to Tuscaloosa to take on number 1 Alabama. We also have number 11 Miami hosting number 16 Virginia Tech coming up on Friday night. And then number 24 Oklahoma travels down to Jordan-Hare to take on number 23 the Auburn Tigers. Also in action, number 12 Arkansas will be playing there in Jerry's World against the Texas A&M Aggies. BYU, number 20, will be taking their show on the road to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears. Number 15, Iowa State will be traveling down to Houston to take on the Houston Cougars. Number 14, North Carolina will be traveling a very short 10-mile ride to face in-state rival the Duke Blue Devils in a very important contest to both teams. Number 3, Ohio State will travel to East Lansing to take on the Michigan State Spartans. Number 21, Oregon will be traveling just down the coast to take on the UCLA Bruins. Number 8, Rutgers will be hosting Washington. We talked about that game coming up on Friday night. Number 9, Utah will be hosting the Arizona Wildcats. Number 19, UCF will be hosting Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. They're in beautiful Orlando, Florida. Number 22, UNLV will be hosting Fresno State. That game is coming up this weekend. Number 13, Ole Miss will kick off conference play and get rid of the diabetic part of their schedule and host conference foe, the Kentucky Wildcats. Pivotal matchup for both teams in this contest. A game that I will be very interested in, the number 18 Notre Dame Fighting Irish will be hosting Louisville. And to quote my friends Julie Balls and Matlock, we do like interesting. There's a good chance I may be at that game this weekend. We'll see how the schedule flips out. Number 7, Indiana will be hosting the Maryland Terrapins there in Bloomington, Indiana. The number 2, Texas Longhorns will be welcoming in-conference opponent in Mississippi State as Texas kicks off their first game in conference in the Southeastern Conference. Number 17, Kansas State will be hosting Oklahoma State there in the Little Apple in Manhattan, Kansas. Pivotal game in conference play for both teams in the Big 12, as both teams are coming off of a loss. And finally, number 25, Clemson will be hosting in-conference opponent, the Stanford Cardinal, there in Clemson, South Carolina. Teams on a bye this week are number 6, Tennessee, coming off of that big-time win there against Oklahoma. Missouri, coming off of that double overtime win against Vanderbilt. Vandy's been playing some really good football, so that is not the laughable result that it would have been in years past. And of course, the Iowa Hawkeyes, number 10, coming off of that big-time win against Minnesota there in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that is our top 25 show, and want to thank you for either watching us on YouTube or streaming this on Twitter or listening on your favorite podcast platform. On behalf of my entire team, Jessica, who was our co-host for the Top 25 show, Summer, our other co-host, and Billy, of course, our senior handicapping analyst. This is Kenneth signing off for the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. Get ready for a fantastic upcoming college football weekend. And as always, God bless.